Coming right up, Straight Talk with Art Levine. Our guest tonight, Dr. Craig Smith, Director of the Center for First Amendment Studies at California State University, Long Beach, as we continue our 21st anniversary year.
Closed captioning provided by Scan Health Plan. Straight Talk is brought to you in part by Southern California Edison. For over 100 years, life powered by Edison. The Press Telegram, your local news leader for over 100 years.
Join us for tonight's edition of Straight Talk. And now your host, Art Levine.
Good evening and welcome to Straight Talk. Tonight we're going to talk about a topic that is front and center in the debate throughout the country on the question of gun control. And we have a real expert, Dr. Craig Smith, Director of the Center for First Amendment Studies here at Long Beach State, to share his expertise. Craig, welcome back to Straight Talk.
It's good to be back, Art.
Let's start with the Second Amendment, which reads very simply, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And different folks have different views as to what the Second Amendment means. Why don't you give us the two sides of it?
Well, you can read it literally, as the Supreme Court sometimes does, and just take it word by word, and you take the phrase out that people have the right to bear arms and therefore they have a right to own guns. However, if you contextualize what the founders meant when they passed that amendment, it takes on a whole different meaning. What happened was that Massachusetts, as you know, ratified the Constitution in 1789 on a contingent basis. They wanted amendments to the Constitution, and one of the amendments they wanted was that one. And the reason they wanted it was because a man named Shays had fomented a rebellion against the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and Massachusetts didn't know how to deal with it. Did they have the power to form a militia to fight Shays back? And so the point of the amendment, and that's why it begins with the language about forming a militia, the point was to empower the states to allow them to allow the citizens to have arms so that they could be in a militia to fight a rebellion. Not that everybody would have a gun in their own house whenever they wanted it.
And just for the record, the Bill of Rights, which includes the first 10 amendments of the Constitution, was passed some years after the Constitution itself was passed.
Yes, in 1791, 2 years later.
Well, the National Rifle Association is probably the most vigorous and articulate spokesman for the gun owners, and they're a very powerful political lobby. And what's their view of these things?
Well, the NRA has allowed registration of weapons, and so a state can require that you register your weapon. They've allowed for some other things, such as the marking of bullets and that kind of thing. But they have opposed bans on assault weapons, which I find very strange, since you don't need an AK-47 to bring down a deer. They've opposed some sensible measures that we've put forward, like fingerprinting handguns, which I can tell you about. And so they're sometimes difficult to deal with.
Well, the tragedies in Newtown, Connecticut and Aurora, Colorado, I think have shifted the public consensus and mood. And you have the feeling that something is going to be passed.
Well, in my opinion, it's about time. I've been working on this since 1998. And it really is annoying that when you think about the carnage and the number of people who have been killed. Now, gun control legislation, whatever it is, can't be 100% effective. Somebody can always bring a gun into the country, or they can go across the state border and get one at a gun show, but it can certainly reduce the number of deaths, and we've been successful in doing that to some extent. When I started this crusade in 1998, there were 12 children a day dying of gun wounds. Either they were shot or there was an accident or whatever. The number's now down to 9 a day. That's 9 too many, but we have reduced the numbers.
And you attribute that in part to these various erratic gun control laws in some states.
In some states, and public awareness that parents should keep their guns locked away in a very secure place. I worked with a group called Ceasefire with the actor Michael Douglas. We made a number of commercials that got people to lock guns away or put finger locks on them so that kids couldn't have access to them. The tragedy in some of these cases is that children with mental problems had parents who left the guns out in the open, and they picked the guns up, went to school, and killed people.
Well, one of the fascinating suggestions that you've made, and you embodied this in an editorial that was printed way back in 1998. And the concept is fingerprinting of guns, that guns have a unique handprint similar to fingerprints on human beings, so that you can tell from what gun any slug has been fired.
Right. It's the bullet head that gets riflings on it from going through the barrel of the gun. So you could shoot, the minute you manufacture, every manufacturer tests the gun, so it has shot a bullet through it. You take the bullet head with the riflings on it. You can encrypt that and send it to the FBI, and they can have a file. There are a number of companies that say it's entirely possible to fingerprint up to 200 million guns. And that...
It is possible.
It is possible. And the good thing about that is the bullet usually stays in the body or at the crime scene. The casing does not. A number of states have now, and we're one of them, have micromarked the casing of the bullet. The problem is many weapons keep the casing inside the gun, so it isn't left at the crime scene. If there are casings at the crime scene, you can pick them up and run off with them. So the bullet head's a better way to go.
So we could have a national database where every gun and the bullet that's shot from that gun is on file. And so when they find a slug at a crime scene, they will know quickly what gun that came from.
That's right.
And with registration requirements, which the NRA, as you mentioned, approves, we can find out who the registered owner of that gun is that resulted in that bullet at the crime scene.
That's right.
Well, who opposes that and why?
Well, we made progress. You know, I came out with that proposal in '98. We got to the Domestic Council of President Clinton. He put it into his 1999 State of the Union address. A year later, in 2000, Dianne Feinstein made it into legislation, introduced it, and it got blocked by the NRA and other pro-gun lobbies.
And what was their argument against fingerprinting of guns? I mean, it seems to me that any rational person, no matter how devoted to guns they might be, would not have a problem with the fingerprinting of a gun.
Well, I think they raised issues that I find artificial. Some people argued that it'd be easier for the government to trace the guns, and therefore they could take our guns away.
But when you register guns...
Absolutely.
And they don't oppose registration.
Absolutely. Some people said it would be too costly to put this program together. I found them disingenuous. I don't want to put words in their mouth. You know, they can defend it as best they want.
Well,
to.
if you believe that fingerprinting would be useful, you can write to your congressperson.
Yes.
Now, it failed because of the NRA at the federal level, but then there was an effort at the state level, and you wrote an editorial in 2002 urging fingerprinting in California. What happened there?
Well, Assemblyman Bob Hertzberg took my proposal and made it into legislation that called for a feasibility study. Let's see if it can work. Let's see if how expensive it is. That got signed into law. Attorney General Bill Lockyer then ran the study, and they found that it was feasible and it was doable. And then everything came to a stop again.
For the same reason?
Yeah.
Well, I think it's time to rethink at least fingerprinting, because that would seem to be a non-intrusive procedure that could help solve the criminal use of guns. And NRA certainly agrees that guns should not be used in a criminal manner, and this would help solve criminal cases.
Right. Right, and I'm not saying substitute this for the casing markings. That's fine too. I mean, the more layers of identification we have of guns, the better able we are to trace them in criminal acts.
But this is separate and independent from the issue of assault weapons, and we can talk about that in the next segment. But fingerprinting of guns makes perfect sense.
It does to me.
Okay, we'll be back with more of our discussion after we pause for these messages.
Supported by Edison International. Californians are getting to be old hands at year-round energy conservation, part of our special awareness of the resources we all depend on. We're making the change to energy-efficient light bulbs, keeping warm weather thermostats set to a comfortable 78 degrees, and giving major appliances the afternoon off. Because when it comes to energy conservation, it all adds up. Life, powered by Edison.
In today's world, everything's connected. From the workplaces that support us, to the homes that welcome us, to the trees and wildlife habitats that remind us how important our environment is. When a bird lands on a branch, and in the midst of a busy day, we stop to watch, it makes us realize we're all in the same boat. The Port of Long Beach welcomes this world with open arms, an environmental policy that's second to none, and a commitment to shaping a vibrant community. The Port of Long Beach, thinking outside the docks.
Hello, I'm Jessica Hardy, a proud Long Beach native and a member of the USA Swimming national team. Having spent much of my life in water, I've developed a deep appreciation for the valuable role that this precious resource plays in our lives. In recent years, California's water supply has become unreliable. To address this reality, Long Beach residents have dramatically reduced their water use through permanent lifestyle changes. In doing so, Long Beach has made itself a leader in water conservation. As I work hard to achieve my personal goal of qualifying for the 2012 Summer Olympics, I encourage you to continue your tremendous efforts to use water in smart and responsible ways. So join me and your fellow Long Beach residents in strengthening the water conservation movement. By making small but significant changes in our water use habits, together we can ensure that we have a reliable water supply for many generations to come.